Welcome to Larry the Alchemist, and welcome to another Sabbath Sunday. This is where Darin and I get together with you on Sundays to discuss all things Black Sabbath. We haven't done a Sabbath Sunday in a while, so we're back. Darin and I also have our Black Sabbath podcast on the Pantheon Podcast Network called Into the Void, a Black Sabbath podcast. Make sure you check that out. That's on all the streaming services. So it's been a little while for us. We haven't had a Sabbath Sunday in a while, so we thought we would do an episode where kind of a reflective episode, kind of just sitting back and talking amongst ourselves, two Sabbath fans. And we're going to kind of ask the question, kind of two questions here. Where do we think Black Sabbath is going to be going as far as the band and potential releases and just the Black Sabbath legacy? What is the future of the Black Sabbath legacy? Things are kind of quiet right now in the world of Black Sabbath. There were some rumors a little while back. We thought there might be a reunion. Maybe there still will be. So we're going to talk about that, and we're also going to talk about what we hope that Black Sabbath does with the Black Sabbath name and the Black Sabbath legacy moving forward. So Darin, what do you think realistically is going to happen with Black Sabbath in the next, let's say, couple years?
Well, I think that it seems like there's some energy around the members, the original members. Bill Ward was recently seen out
Mhm.
with Tony Iommi. Did you see that? That popped up recently.
Yeah.
That made everybody's Facebook status. Everybody was talking about that. It's exciting because Bill is probably the most elusive. We often see Geezer out and about, and more recently Tony dropped that instrumental song, which was really
Mhm.
cool. It was for the perfume, it was for the fragrance or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people like that. No vocals, of course, but it had a very Iommi-ish kind of sinister sound quality to it, which made everybody think that, oh, there could be some gas in the tank. There might be some inspiration for another Sabbath thing. And then, yesterday we saw Bill out and about. The only thing is, to me, that seemed to be the most tentative is Ozzy. I mean, every time I see Ozzy, he looks very frail
Yeah.
and not in very good health. And I heard recently that he's going to undergo one more operation, and he's putting all his cards on the table, and he's saying, "Look, I'm going to do one more operation. Regardless of the outcome, I'm not going to go under the knife again. I've gone under the. This is all as a result of his quad accident. He's going to have one more operation, and if it helps, great. If it doesn't, so be it. He's not going to have another operation. Obviously, anybody that's seen him knows that his body's like twisted. He has
Yeah.
Parkinson's. He's in poor health. He looks old. I mean, for years, Ozzy always looked like. I mean, you could see that he was aging, but he always looked like Ozzy. Like there was an energy there. Now he's starting to look like he's really slowing down. So of the four original members, I would say that it, Ozzy is really he's the factor. He's the thing that I'm just not sure if we're going to be able to see something with the four original members. I hope so. And like we've talked about, and I think I've had some private discussions with people where we talked about what we would expect or what we'd like to see from if the original four would reunite,
Yeah.
what's reasonable to suspect or expect, what's realistic. I mean, I would just like to hear like three or four new songs, and I think that would be great. I mean, I would get a lot of enjoyment from that. Um, it would get a lot of mileage from me just to hear, I mean, two, three, four maximum. That'd be great. Hear Bill Ward's drumming, and I know it's not Bill Ward as it was in the '70s, but just he has a style. It's Bill
Yeah.
Ward. Bill Ward playing the Skins. You're going to hear Bill Ward. I want to hear Bill Ward playing with Tony and Geezer again. I want to hear Ozzy's voice over all of that. That's my hope. And a lot of people have said that they hope that Sharon doesn't have anything to do with it. I think that's virtually impossible that she's not going to be involved with it in some capacity. Likewise, Gloria Butler, usually something more silently than Sharon. She's a big part of this whole thing too. And I could see that being something that would probably make things really complicated. But if it was more like of an organic thing where the guys just got together in the same room and Tony came in just like the old days, busted out a riff, Ozzy on the fly came up with a melody, and they just put a song together organically and work on maybe three songs and get to the point where they have them up and running and record them. I would love for that to happen, and I think that would be really good closure. I mean, we haven't gotten into the album 13 in our podcast yet, but when we do, I'm sure we're going to get into the whole aspect of that album not feeling like it was the best way. Actually, we've talked about our opinion of 13 on Sabbath Sundays. I mean, we're both in agreement that it's open ended. It's not the
Hmm.
best way that the band, you know,
Yeah.
there was no real closure provided. And I'd love like three or four more songs to give us that closure and be like,
Yeah.
okay, that's great. That's perfect finale to a my favorite band to an outstanding, you know, iconic hard rock, heavy metal band. I want that, and I'm sure all the other fans do too. So that's where my hope is. My hope is that these guys they don't have a lot of time, realistically, not just because of their age, but their health. So I hope if something happens, we hear about it in the next few months or so. That's what
Yeah.
I want anyway.
I mean, I agree with you. And we did do a Sabbath Sunday where we kind of talked about this when these rumors started sort of circulating. It was kind of one of those where there's smoke, there's fire, but it seems to have died down. Now, I do admit Tony running into Bill, but man, I think that the ship has sailed on this. I think with Ozzy's health, you mentioned the Geezer. Geezer posts pictures a lot, but Geezer looks like a guy that's just enjoying his retirement. You see pictures of him with his grandkids at a Taylor Swift concert. You see him at a football game or a sporting event. I just think that I just think that really Black Sabbath should move into preserving the legacy mode. As much as I would like them to do something to all the reasons that you said to put some closure on this, it never felt right. 13 shouldn't have been the last record. Man, I don't see how it could happen. Maybe it could, maybe a couple songs, like you said, anything to just put a nice little period on the end of this, but I just have this feeling that it's just not going to happen, and it's there's just so much that needs to sort of line up for these guys to do it. I just don't think it's going to happen. So I would like to see them move into kind of a legacy mode, meaning like, and maybe this is Tony Iommi. Maybe he's already sort of in this mindset. He put out the Tony Martin years box set. That was a huge gap that needed to be filled. That got taken care of. There's talk about he's got the Born Again tapes. I'd be perfectly fine if Black Sabbath, if we were getting okay, I'll be realistic. Let's say twice a year, we're getting something from Black Sabbath. We get a remixed Born Again. Maybe we get a surprise live show that we didn't know was out there in the vaults from the Dio era. Maybe we get a remix of another record. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they release those elusive, mysterious box sets that just sort of evaporated into the air and no one has spoken of them since. Maybe something comes of that. They just sort of move into a mode where they're just kind of maybe releasing some stuff they have in the vaults, shows they have in the vaults. I don't know. I would be okay with that, just as long as there was something coming out on a somewhat regular basis. I'd love to be surprised and find out that these guys have been getting together behind closed doors secretly and they've been working on some stuff, but man, I just see Ozzy, even Bill is as exciting as it was to see Tony and Bill together. Boy, it just almost feels like, you know what, guys, enjoy your retirement. It's
Yeah.
between
Oh, for
health
sure.
and
Yeah.
everything else. It's almost like, I could see them saying, we just don't need this kind of stress in our life right now. And let the
No.
legacy then, do the legacy proper, do it right, do it good, do it justice, and give us a steady flow of, like the Frank Zappa catalog. His son, his family runs it, his two Amit and I believe Diva, his youngest daughter, and they put out stuff on a pretty regular basis, shows, unreleased stuff. Now, Zappa is a different animal than Sabbath as far as unreleased stuff, but they could easily do something where we're getting these live albums and just different things coming out on a somewhat regular basis so the fans stay interested and so the fans feel like the Black Sabbath legacy is being treated right. That Tony Martin box set was a big step for that. A lot, me and you felt very cheated that the Tony Martin era wasn't getting the respect that it deserved. Thank goodness Iommi and Tony Martin, they all the red tape that it took to get that out, they did it and they did the legacy right. There was a huge hole there in the Black Sabbath legacy. So at this point, that's kind of what I'm hoping for, that we just can get a
Yeah.
steady flow of interesting legacy releases.
I would expect that. And I also, I definitely, I want to hear the Born Again box set or whatever they're going to do. I mean, I think that one is probably up next. They could remix it. And I don't want them to get too carried away with it because I do want to retain some of the charm of the original or some of the sound of the original because at this point it's kind of burned into the way the album is, the way that we've always known the album. I don't really want it to change radically, but I would like to hear a little bit more clarity between the instruments, a little more separation between the drums and the bass and the guitar. Um, but I hope they do something with that. And there's a lot of these Sabbath bootlegs that are coming out now, and some of them are getting kind of redundant. Some of them are
Hmm.
like the same shows, Asbury Park,
Yeah.
um, the 1970 Paris 1970s now, and like three or four different versions of it. But there's plenty of shows that I mean, there's like the Italian trilogy that was bootlegged recently. We've talked about this too. So I mean, there's a resource for live material. Other bands have done it. Deep Purple's done it. Jimi Hendrix. I mean, there's always Motorhead. Every record store day, there's something.
Yep.
There's a new live album. I mean, obviously, Motorhead is done, and Lemmy's gone, so there's never going to be another Motorhead. But what keeps Motorhead relevant is that we keep seeing these live recordings coming out. And they're very enjoyable. They're not slick. They're not overly produced. They're pretty much bootlegs, but they're very listenable. And so once or twice a year, it kind of reintroduces Motorhead into the market. Sabbath would be good to do that. And I think there's plenty of things they could do. I mean, we still don't have, if we're going to talk about box sets, we still don't have a box set for the first album. We don't have one for Master of Reality. We have an anniversary version that came out a year after the actual anniversary of Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. But we don't have a box set for that.
Yeah.
And
Never
granted,
say
there's not
die.
a lot of outtake. Well, there might be some outtakes, but there isn't a lot of like extra tracks or anything. The band would basically record with the exact amount of songs that they put on the final album. But in each of those years, I mean, there's a bunch of shows that they could put on there, so we can have a double live album or something, or two shows. We could have a tour book replica. We could have all kinds of things for the fans. I mean, you could put something together. Just you know, some people just put their heads together and think of some things that fans would appreciate as deluxe editions for these albums. So yeah, I mean, I'm expecting and I'm hoping we get some more deluxe editions. But I mean, I still it's hard to let go. It's hard to let go of the fact that the four guys are still
Yeah.
alive. I mean, it would be easier for me to just kind of put it aside and say, hey, well, that ship has sailed, but they're still alive. Granted, Geezer's definitely he seems to be enjoying his retirement, but I mean, just doesn't have to be a tour. There doesn't have to be anything
Yeah.
rigorous. They could stay at home. All the guys, Bill, I'm sure probably too. I know Ozzy has a studio in his house.
Yeah.
They all have studios. I mean, they could all record. They could just wake up in the morning, go through their normal routine, take a half hour, an hour, go up to the studio and do their part, send it over. I mean, this is an age where, bands don't need to be in the same room. They don't need to be
Yeah.
separated by room dividers anymore. They can track in a completely different place. So I mean, I don't necessarily think that it would be a rigorous thing for them to do. And so that's why I'm holding out hope that we can get a few songs. And if it sucks, well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. But I don't think it would. I think that I'm pretty sure that if they took the time to do something, I think it would probably be pretty
Gotta be
good. And
something
I think
there.
that I think they've learned from their experience with 13. From what I understand now, a lot of things have come out in the press about uh, Tony's relationship with Rick Rubin, and
Yeah.
Geezer saying, "Well, even if it were to happen, I don't think if anybody was entertaining the idea, I don't think Rick would be very interested in working with Tony, nor Tony interested in working with Rick," which would indicate that there's some ill will by the time these guys left the studio. And of course, the album doesn't sound very cohesive. There's some songs in it that I like, but overall, there's a lot of things we can punch holes in, and we will when we get to that portion of the 13 podcast. But yeah, I think left to their own devices, without managers, without big name producers, without other
Yeah.
people, forcing them into a situation where they don't feel comfortable. I think without that thing happening, I think that they could probably get excited, and inspiration could possibly flow. And they're still alive. I mean, that's the thing. It's
Yeah.
like that's
Yeah.
why it's so hard for me to let go of it. It's like
I
at their
know.
age, it's like you guys are alive. You're still
Yeah.
out there. You're still enjoying music. You're still like involved in it. Still involved in the legacy of Black Sabbath. Just
Yeah.
give us a couple songs.
And it would just be a
But if they don't
feel
want to, I
good.
I totally get it. I totally get it. But
It would just be a feel good thing too. Even if they just did one song, just to know that the four guys, you have four original guys, were able to get together in a room and do something and put something out. It would just, even if the song was just okay, nothing special, it would still just feel good knowing that it was the four guys. Like you
yeah,
said, don't get some producer who's putting their stamp on it. I mean, as much as I like the last Ozzy album and what Andrew Watt did with it, I don't want a guy to put his stamp on it. Just find somebody who can help them set up the microphones and record it. Iommi's just this stuff that he's been doing for his cologne perfume thing. They sound great. So however he's doing that, just give us something that it makes it sound like these four guys got together and they did something so that we can just have this, just have it feel good. I mean, it felt good just seeing Tony and Bill kind of together, smiling and everything. I don't know, it just the way 13 was to fighting with Bill and everything. He would just love to see these guys reconcile so that when the day unfortunately comes and one of them is not here, it's going to be really a shame if when one of them does pass, if the other guys say, we should have done this or we should have done that, or we were talking about doing
yeah,
this, but we never got around to doing it. And that's going to really, really be a shame because, like you said, everybody's here now and it's a tough thing, Ozzy's health and everything. It's, you don't know what's going on with all that stuff and whatever he's going through and everything. So, but yeah, just if they could find a way to, gosh, even if it was just the four of them sitting in a room, talking and reminiscing, and just so we know that everyone's at peace and, you know, again, if they can squeeze a song out or something like that, that would be amazing
yeah.
too. But
But one thing for sure is I think that the band, the Black Sabbath name, the reputation, I think it needs to stay relevant. And I think one way to do that is to continue to put out these deluxe box sets, or
mhm.
maybe just offer two versions. If you have the money, if you can afford it, go all in on the deluxe box set. But there might also be a standalone LP, double LP or something, for people that don't want to put that much money into it. But by all means, keep things coming out. I mean, it's not just for the sake of like making a buck. It's because it's important that this music
Hmm.
continues to stay relevant. It is relevant, and and with hopefully it isn't forgotten about. That there's always something available where a kid 13 years old, 14 years old, the same age we were or whatever when we were starting to get into this, he goes into the record store and sees the latest version of Paranoid, and he gets it, and it changes his life. I would love to see that continue for the next 100 years, and the
Yeah.
music is there. And I mean, maybe it may not be, as similar to things that are coming out, but I think there's always going to be something attractive about the music of Black Sabbath. I mean, especially when you're talking about the early music. I mean, it's not encumbered by a lot of um, studio trickery and things like that. I mean, you've got your basic primary instruments. You've got great drums of Bill Ward. You've got really awesome tone of Tony Iommi, great bass, Ozzy's vocals, which are unmistakable, have so much personality. I think no matter when it is, I think that there's always going to be an appeal for that. And so my hope is that it manages to stay relevant, and record companies or whoever's responsible for marketing this stuff keeps it out there, keeps it in print, and does something that makes it attractive for the younger audience. Because I'd hate to think that you know there would be a world without Black Sabbath, that a kid couldn't walk into a record store and
Yeah.
buy a Black Sabbath record. That would
Yeah.
hurt my soul.
Heck,
So
even for, modern technology, I have Apple streaming. That's what I stream through Apple Music and Dolby Atmos. This is a big thing now where there's a Dolby Atmos mix of Holy Diver. There's a Dolby Atmos mix of some of the Megadeth records. A lot of bands are going back and they're doing these Dolby Atmos mixes, and it creates this sort of 3D effect, and you're hearing all these things you never heard before. There's a quad mix of Paranoid, and there's a Dolby Atmos mix of Tyranny and Mutation, I think, from Blue Oyster Cult, which originally also had a quad mix back in the 70s. And when you do that in Dolby Atmos, you get all this stuff that you from that original quad mix, stuff that you don't hear in the stereo version. So that's something easy that they could do. Modern technology, everybody, a lot of people listening to
sure.
streaming do Dolby Atmos remixes of all the Sabbath stuff. That would be really, really fascinating. So there's plenty of stuff that they could do to keep the legacy going, keep it interesting, do it for the fans, do it for the new fan, do it just, to keep the name alive and keep it out there. So, all right,
Yeah.
well, there you go. There's our thoughts on what is the future. What does the future hold for Black Sabbath? What we hope and what we think is the future for Black Sabbath. Let us know what you think of our thoughts on that, and let us know what you hope for the future for Black Sabbath and what you think Black Sabbath is going to be doing in the future. Let us know in the comments down below, and we'll see you at the next Sabbath Sunday.